This is Planet Poet Words in Space here at WIOX. I'm your host, Sharon Israel. So glad you're with me today, and I'm honored to have writer and playwright Nina Shengold as my guest by phone to discuss her new, beautiful, and inspiring book, Reservoir Year, A Walker's Book of Days, out this year from Syracuse Press. Hi, Nina.
Hi, Sharon.
Oh, it's good to have you with me.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm going to read your bio. Nina Shengold's books include Clearcut, Anchor Books, A Book Sense Notable Selection, River of Words, Portraits of Hudson Valley Writers, SUNY Press, and 14 theater anthologies for Vintage Books and Viking Penguin. Shengold won a Writers Guild Award for her teleplay, Labor of Love, and the ABC Playwright Award for Homesteaders. Nina teaches creative writing at Vassar College and has profiled more than 150 writers for Chronogram, Poets and Writers, and Vassar Quarterly. She's a founding member of the theater company Actors and Writers, author series Word Café, and Hudson Valley Writers Resist. She was born in Brooklyn, grew up in New Jersey, escaped to Alaska, and now lives and works in the foothills of New York's Catskill Mountains. And I just want to read a blurb about this book. I want to say, when I went through it, especially in these incredibly crazy times, that it's a real solace to have a reservoir year. And this is what Laura Shane Cunningham, author of Sleeping Arrangements in a Place in the Country, says. Nina Shengold's memoir explores a reservoir of feelings. Accompanied by her elegant, unpretentious prose, the reader comes upon surprises: a bear, an eagle feather, a crimson forest, filled to the brim with subtle revelations of sun-washed illuminations, but also the poignant history: a drowned town lies below the shimmering surface. Expect to be moved, and then overcome by the tenderness and variety of Shengold's emotional literary palette. And that's a blurb that really describes the book. And I know you're not going to say anything about that, Nina.
Oh, yes, I am. That blurb is a poem. I'm so grateful to Laura.
It is. I was saying, oh, my goodness, those words really have a lot of internal rhyme to them. And you're here because I find this book very poetic.
Well, I appreciate that.
And we'll talk about the connections to your connections to poetry, and the connections that the reader can make, and I'm sure you've made in reading and writing the book. This is an interesting journey, a leap year of 2016, correct?
Yes, a leap year in every sense, I think.
Right. How and why did this project begin for you, Nina?
Well, there's not what a screenwriter would call an inciting incident. There wasn't a bolt of lightning or a terrible tragedy that happened that made me decide to do this. The premise of the book is very simple. I live quite close to the Ashokan Reservoir, and which is in Ulster County, and I decided to walk there every day for a year and write about whatever I noticed. So it's 366 micro essays, and I walked there at all times of day and all kinds of weather, sometimes by myself, sometimes with other people, and just tried to pay as much attention as I could to where I was and what was going on around me. And at some point later that day, I wrote up a kind of a sketch draft, and typed it up later that night. And at the end of a year, I had a first draft, and then I edited and edited and eventually had a book.
That's incredible. And you also had personal occurrences in your life.
I did. It wasn't quite a random year. It was the year the one thing I knew would happen during the year, which stretches from September to September. This wasn't really a planned project. It was a book that kind of jumped me. I took a walk one night and wrote a little bit about it, and then I I enjoyed that so much I did it again, and then I did it again and again. And within the first week, I think I had the idea of committing to doing it for a year. The one thing I knew would happen during that calendar year is that I would turn 60. My daughter was in college. I had lost my dog recently. I had a lovely old dog. I had walked every single day for the 13 years he was with us, and I couldn't bear to take the same walk without my dog. And at some point it occurred to me I could take a different walk, and I guess this was it. This was my learning to walk myself without a dog.
That is great, learning to walk yourself. And the immersion in the area happened gradually over the year.
I think so, yes. I mean, it had always been, because this is before the beautiful new Ashokan Rail Trail was open. This is actually before the Trump presidency. The Reservoir year started in 2015, September 2015, and stretched to 2016. So at that point, the only part of the 44 miles of shoreline that was open to the public was the 2.5-mile stretch along the south shore of the reservoir, which is on maps and documents called the promenade. I don't think I've ever heard a local person say that. People usually say walking the dam or the walkway. So that was a place that had always been kind of my special walk, because I couldn't walk my dog there, and that was my daily walk was around my own block where I could. But when I had visitors from someplace else and wanted to show them how beautiful the Catskills were, that's where we went. And then it became my jam. It became my daily thing.
And the structure of the book is, you mentioned that you start in September. You do have a preamble, then this fall, winter, spring, summer, and an afterword. And could you talk a little bit about that structure?
Well, it follows the cycles of a year. It's among other things about the passage of time and the change of seasons. So and I wanted to divide it into chapters, as it were. Like most introductions, the preamble was written later, and I think it was Leslie Sharp who gave me the wonderful idea of calling it preamble rather than the usual foreword or introduction. And the afterword was written a few years later, as it was going into print when many things had changed.
It's so interesting because as I read the book, when you're reading the fall, you anticipate the next season. And when you're in the winter, you anticipate spring and you anticipate summer. So you're in it, but there's also, what's coming. It gives an odd momentum to the whole thing.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, the scary thing about writing a book in this way is the plot is absolute random. I'm used to writing fiction, whether it's plays or stories or screenplays, something that has a narrative and where you can make decisions about what's going to happen to your characters. And this one, I was really kind of just giving myself over to it and hoping that what interested me would interest readers.
You make note, so to speak, that during your actual walk, you are not taking notes.
No, that was a decision I made very early on, actually.
That would scare a lot of writers.
Well, you don't take notes. I had a writer friend who also wrote a wonderful blurb for the book, Akiko Bush, who is a nature and design writer. Has a wonderful book called 9 Ways to Cross a River. It's about swimming across the Hudson and other rivers and the kind of midlife meditations that go with that practice for her. And when she asked me about not taking notes, I burst out laughing. I said, "Did you have a notepad with you when you swam across the Hudson?" You remember what's important and you remember what's in your body. I think that the practice of learning to notice and kind of carry home the phrases and keywords and images that it's a kind of a mental sifting that goes in. I wanted to be there when it happened. I did not want to be stopping to take out a book and write something down,
right?
Or take photographs or anything else that would take me out of the physical action of walking and observing.
Which is the real way to do it. You can take a million pictures and not know anything.
I know, I do. The weird thing is, after I wrote the book, I must have missed having a way to slow down and look closer, because I started taking photographs at the Ashoka now, and I now have hundreds of them. But I never did that during the
the pictures are great. I look forward to them.
Reservoir year.
Yeah, I took a poetry workshop with Kimiko Hahn, and she was talking about how to look at a poem, how to explicate a poem. But the first thing she said was, "I read a poem with my body." And to get pleasure out of it. And I think the body memory of these things serves your intellect. I was very interested by that and by your process.
I interviewed Marie Howe some years ago, and she said that when she's teaching, she always gives her students an assignment to write a poem that they don't write down, to write a poem that they carry in their bodies, that they memorize and speak aloud to themselves, run through their head, edit in that way, and she said it's almost always the best piece of writing they turn in all semester, because it's been so honed and so whittled down by the need to remember each word.
Oh, thank you for that. That's great.
I thought that was great.
Wonderful. And in the fall section, it's full of color and the end of things. Would you read a section from the fall of the book?
Sure, I'd be happy to. It's laid out in a kind of logbook fashion, so that I can see the date and time and where I am in the process at the end of each one. So this is day 24, October 8th, 1:40 p.m. Today's breaking news: color. Miss Ashokan has started to model for calendar shots. Flaming trees dot the hillsides. Persimmon rose hips on the lone dog rose over the guardrail. Bouffant cumulus and morning glory blue sky. A couple climbs over the fence next to the yellow "No entry for any purpose" sign to eat lunch by the water. I drive past a blonde Harley rider in chartreuse leathers, then wait beside the orange and white striped safety barrels for the red light to turn green.
That's Nina Shengold reading from her book, Reservoir Year. It's filled with detail that the reader can totally visualize. I'm here by phone from the Hudson Valley with writer and playwright Nina Shengold. Your book is full of the personal struggles, getting to the res, as you call it, every day. And that's a very human struggle. And you often address the enormity of your commitment. If you would briefly talk about that.
Well, I'm not the most disciplined person on earth. I tend to make grand resolutions about writing so many pages a day, or exercising a certain amount, or losing something I'm going to do every single day. And the first time I don't do it, it kind of all goes out the window. The New Year's resolution is just over. So I thought that this was not something I consciously set out to do, but I think I was trying to break that pattern and actually stick to something that I made a declaration about. It was easy to do when it was sort of a ramble and this is fun, I'll keep doing this. And then it became a commitment, and at a certain point I thought, I wonder if I'm writing a book. And then it got a little scary, as most writing projects do when you're at the beginning of them. And there were a lot of days when I had really grave doubts about the project, whether I was writing anything that would be of interest to anyone but me. But I became obsessed. I thought even if I can't sell the book, it's something I want to complete. I want to do this every day for a year. I don't quite know why, but this matters to me, and I want to keep going.
And that obsession comes through. It's sort of like Beckett saying, "I can't go on. I must go on."
It does. It does. I mean, inevitably there's terrible weather. There are days when you're not in the mood. There are days when you're too busy. There are all these things. But and it's a particular kind of a challenge. It's one thing to have your doubts when you're midway up the Appalachian Trail and you have to go one way or another to get off it. It's another thing when you're a few miles away and you're going to climb into your Subaru and drive down to a trailhead, which was for me the kind of default setting was the parking lot and Olive Bridge. There's a second public parking lot on the walkway on the other end, which is locally called the Frying Pan. It's a kind of a circle coming off a driveway, and there's 2.5 miles of road in between those two. That's where I started out, and at some point I started looking across the water and getting curious about the rest of the shoreline. And I had driven around and across the reservoir many, many times and seen gates, numbered gates for fishing access. And I got curious about them and ended up getting myself a fishing license and starting to explore some of the back paths and walk along the beaches and just to try and see the reservoir from all directions rather than the same view that I had seen for years.
I want you to read a passage, Day 78, which talks about this particular notion of keeping going. If you would read that.
Okay. This is yes. This one is very much about the notion of keeping going. Day 78, December 1st, 5:10 p.m. Best thing I can say about today's walk is that I did it. Fog and cold rain after dark. Am I really going to do this all winter? I doubt it. It's going to get hard, and I'm going to start balking, and there'll come a day when I don't go at all, and the whole thing will end in a flurry of guilt and recrimination, because that's what I do. Do we ever stop blaming ourselves? I think of a poem Papa read me when I was too young, Randall Jarrell's The Woman at the Washington Zoo, with its bleak final lines. You know what I was. You see what I am. Change me. Change me.
Oh, there's so much in there, and especially I said, a poem, Randall Jarrell's The Woman at the Washington Zoo, and your father read that to you when you were 10.
Randall Jarrell, I'm sorry, my father thought it was pronounced Jarrell, and I got that wired into my head wrong, but I think he actually did say Jarrell.
Jarrell, would you read The Woman at the Washington Zoo for us?
I would love to.
Oh, good.
It's a beautiful poem. The Woman at the Washington Zoo. The saris go by me from the embassies, cloth from the moon, cloth from another planet. They look back at the leopard like the leopard. And I, this print of mine that has kept its color alive through so many cleanings, this dull, navy I wear to work and wear from work, and so to my bed, so to my grave, with no complaints, no comment, neither from my chief, the deputy chief assistant, nor his chief. Only I complain. This serviceable body that no sunlight dyes, no hand suffuses, but dome-shadowed, withering among columns, wavy beneath fountains, small, far off, shining in the eyes of animals, these beings trapped as I am trapped, but not themselves the trap. Aging, but without knowledge of their age, kept safe here, knowing not of death for death. Oh, bars of my own body, open, open. The world goes by my cage and never sees me. And there come not to me, as come to these, the wild beasts, sparrows pecking the llama's grain, pigeons settling on the bear's bread, buzzards tearing the meat the flies have clouded. Vulture, when you come for the white rat that the foxes left, take off the red helmet of your head, the black wings that have shadowed me, and step to me as man, the wild brother at whose feet the white wolves fawn, to whose hand of power the great lioness stalks, purring. You know what I was. You see what I am. Change me. Change me.
That's Nina Shengold reading. Oh, my God.
Nina Shengold's voice, but not my poem. I wish.
I'm just going to fling myself on the floor right now. That's amazing. That's a great reading of an amazing poem. I just love that you put it in day 78. And a man wrote that poem a long time ago. How did you react when your father read that to you when you were so young?
Well, I think it's not the kind of thing you usually read to an 8-year-old, you know? Mm. We had a great family tradition of reading and reading out loud, reading it usually in my parents' bed. My two brothers and I would all pile on. My father was kind of a frustrated actor and wonderful, wonderful reader. And my mother read too sometimes. And as we got older, we read things. But you know, we read either children's books or I think he read some Dickens to us. He read things that adult literature he thought kids would get. And
how wonderful for you.
Oh, yeah. God, it was. It's a huge part of my growing up. In this particular time, he was lying on the bed reading something, and I jumped up on the bed and said, "Papa, what are you reading?" And he read me that poem, and he looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "Can you see what a wonderful poem that is, or are you too young?"
Oh, my goodness.
And of course I was too young, but what I could see was that my father was so moved by these words, and that clicked something in me that I think never went away.
So have you kept that in your body too? Interesting.
Yeah, just kind of that a book can make someone do this, can make someone feel.
But Nina, you're also a poet. You will not talk about this, but you won a poetry award, the Connecticut Student Poets Award, when you were in Vassar.
40 years ago, I won an award for poetry. It's a little-known fact about me.
Well, now everybody knows.
It was the first money I ever made as a writer, so it was very significant.
And how much did you make?
I made $35 a reading. I was one of 4 poets selected from different Connecticut colleges who were all competing in this program. And we toured the state of Connecticut reading together. We did, I think, 8 readings times $35. I mean, I bought a pair of shoes, you know.
Which is more than what most poets can say today.
Exactly.
You have to read 2 poems.
Well, I don't know how they've stood the test of time, but, you know, I teach 19 and 20-year-olds now, so that's how old I was when I wrote these. I was very lucky. Richard Wilbur was teaching at Wesleyan, where I was an undergrad, and I got accepted into his workshop. I think it was my sophomore year. He was a wonderful teacher, and most of the poems that I read in that Connecticut Student Poets Tour were from that class, including this one, which is being read for the first time in 40 years.
Thank you. I feel honored.
Is called At a Party of Male Models. Their tautness is too much for me. I serve them amber drinks. They stroke the glasses, grouped in photogenic pairs. The table's virgin. No one eats hors d'oeuvres. Iced biscuits lie neglected. Onion dip awaits the first fine carrot thrill. Cleft chins and fleshless straight-line mouths, lean jaws, tanned skin. Their hard, flat bellies wear the same size pants. I, in my apron, shift my rippling weight and feel my soft extraneousness, the honey flood of hip. I see the models standing stiff and challenge them to sprawl. Tobacco smoke and leather chairs. This room's too brown. If someone fat walked in, I'd marry him.
That is a party of male models. Fabulous. That's good.
Thanks.
I really like that.
Well, as I say, I was an undergrad, and it'll
Good
be
rhythm,
the ones that have some
imagery.
humor have stood the test of time better than the ones that I think my daughter would declare, "Oh, Mom, you were so emo."
One more short one, Nina.
Okay. Well, this is from a little bit later. Still wrote poetry for a while after college, and this one actually comes from a short stint when I was living in the Pacific Northwest and working at a very early Copper Canyon press, which was then kind of a small letterpress factory. And I'll tell that story, but let me read this tiny poem first. I wrote a series of what I called Western haikus for Sam Hamill, who ran the press, who's a very, very learned translator and scholar of Asian languages, and also really deep into Jerry Jeff Walker. Loved his country western music.
And he was the co-founder of Copper Canyon.
Yeah. And I worked there as a kind of a volunteer apprentice typesetter for a few months when I was bumming around the Pacific Northwest. Anyway, I wrote Sam what I called the Western Haiku series. And this is one called Death of a Salesgirl. Everything must go, said the sign in the window. She read it and went.
That's very concise.
Well,
it's real microfiction. It tells a whole story. It really does. Thank you, Nina, for sharing your poetry with us. And you're listening to Planet Poet Words in Space. I'm your host, Sharon Israel, and with me today by phone is writer Nina Shengold. And now bringing us the latest poetry news and the latest in poetic insights is Planet Poet's Poet-at-Large, Pamela Manchet-Pierce, joining me by phone from Manhattan. Paris Lit Up, which hosted poet Pamela Manchet-Pierce during her Paris book tour for her chapbook Widowland, just published two of her collages in their annual magazine. And hello, Pamela.
Hello, Sharon. Hello, Nina.
Hi, how are you?
I'm having such a good time as a listener. I may give up my segment.
No, please don't.
And just let you keep going because I'm having a wonderful time listening to both of you. So
thank you.
And anyway, I'm happy to be here today, and I really am. I'm enjoying myself thoroughly. So now for something completely different, I'm going to read a poem. And one of the things that I realized is that, to me, it's noteworthy for myself that this poem has made its way through four different poetry workshops in the last 2 years. So this is an important poem to me, and I keep bringing it back. And as I began to think about that, I began to think about the incredible number of poetry workshops that are available, and now with COVID online, I mean, they're available all over the place. And then I realized that these are, in my mind at least, and I think it's a fact, byproducts of the plethora of MFA programs that we now have. Mm-hmm. And I began to look back at that, and the statistics are interesting. Data is interesting that, in 1936, Iowa was basically it for these programs. And then in 1994, there were 64 of them. And then in 2020, with part of this surge, we now have over 250 MFA programs in the United States, graduating between 3,000 and 4,000 graduates per year.
Oh, my goodness.
And when Nina said she earned $35 a reading, there are people who have just paid $80,000 for these degrees who can't get $35 per reading,
Ain't it the truth?
And I kept thinking, my train of thought really was that, everybody is jockeying for exposure, and both in print, online, in readings, but reading is not increasing. Writing is increasing, but reading is not increasing necessarily. You Sharon, with Planet Poet, which I'm so proud to be on all the time, this is really about reading. You're introducing writers, and I want to read most of the people that come come on the show, whether I'm on the show or not, and I'm listening, and that you're also giving voice to writers, so that it's the opposite of that. You're not creating more writers, you're creating more opportunities for them. So I think you're really doing a service. I mean, I really that really came to mind today as I was thinking about being on the show. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this final version of Black Iris, and then I'm going to read you a stanza where the first writing workshop I brought this to, where I was saved from myself by the leader of the workshop. So this is Black Iris as it stands today, okay? Black Iris. Made in the earth, a dead man left to me, plucked from the tundra he left behind, I tended the iris field as hell tumbled day into day like dominoes of radiated bone until the end. It was a coyote killing field by night, that garden, where dogs, deer were ripped to meat, where blood and fight shadowed brightly in snow as irises quickened in the ground below. His body hidden inside a black nylon bag, and my widow's flesh in proper dress on that June morning, as irises climaxed narcotic perfume into the paralyzed air. Later, and far away, my winter cracked into spring, then melted into summer, and I pressed the dark fragrance of trembling blossoms into a small shopping bag. All I could manage to give you a living man then, but still only black would do, for my only beauty offered to yours, rarest flower on earth, your eyes, your hair, my dream, to crush our hearts together in the dark.
Pamela, that's gorgeous.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Nina.
So powerful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I'd love to hear that. Thank you.
No, it's true.
I began this poem in a Duende poetry workshop with Sarah Orvio at Poets House here in Manhattan, and the prompt was to write a poem about a flower. And I'm going to read you a stanza that I was urged to leave out of this poem, and I did, okay? Days I spent in the sun planting. Inside the house I sweated the tempo of body love with my husband. It ended with an orgy of horror. Hell that tumbled day into day like dice made of rotted teeth and fractured bones. There was death between the planting and blooming, between the horror and the blossom. You saved me with beauty. And it was unanimous in this first workshop that this was really over the top, and that the rest of the poem did not earn this. So I left it out, and I think that in addition to reworking the order of the stanzas in this poem many times, I think it really served the poem well to not have that particular stanza in it.
It's a good stanza, but you sort of say that in the poem anyway.
Yes. I do. I save it in other ways. And there's the stanza about the coyote killing field, went in and out, and different workshops liked it, and some did not. And I'll tell you, the four that I was in with this is I was with Sarah Orvio at Poets House, and then I was at the Hudson Valley Writers Center in Phillips Manor in Westchester with Martha Collins. And then I brought it to the Mark Doty group at Sharon Springs Poetry Festival very recently. And the most current place that I brought this was with Joe Pitkin at the Poetry Barn in West Hurley. So I think that after going over Joe's notes...
Wonderful mentors.
Yeah.
Aren't they? This is it. This is like a pantheon of these fabulous instructors, and how fortunate I have been to be able to have one of them with Sarah Orvio was in person, and then the other three I've done online. It's very exciting. It's very exciting to be able to move a poem through these different groups and refine it and refine it and refine it, and have the the advice of these astute, very experienced mentors in each group that are really doing so much for all of us. So
you also have to know when to take advice and when to leave it behind.
True. It's absolutely true.
Because it can cause confusion, but with those kind of erudite input, it's a good thing. The poem is beautiful as it is. Don't touch it anymore.
Well, you know what I was thinking was you were just saying this is that I've been through a zillion writing workshops since 1977, and one of the old saws that has come up, and it really I think is true. They say if you're in a workshop and the other students tell you that something is wrong, listen to that. But if they tell you how to fix it, don't listen to that.
I said that to my students at Vassar yesterday.
Oh, are you not?
I did. We're in workshop mode, and people are getting confused because one person says this and another person says that. And I said, look at it as trouble spotting, not as problem solving.
Oh, that's
right.
Great.
I think that's absolutely right.
Very wise. Pamela, once again, you have brought us the poetry zeitgeist, and through your own wonderful interpretations. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. And I'm going to now sit back, Nina. I'm enjoying this so much, and I look forward to reading your book. And I'm now going to sit back, and I'm just going to enjoy myself for the next half hour. So go to it, and thanks for having me, Sharon.
Thanks. Pamela. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Nina, your work, your micro essays, they also seem like prose poems at times to me. And did you have that in mind when you were writing?
Well, I think so because, I'm a huge reader of poetry. I really stopped writing poetry after college, or it trickled off. What I found was that I was a little too literal-minded for the most part, and that I was more comfortable writing dialogue and action, and that. So I was drawn first to playwriting, and then did a little time as a screenwriter, and then started writing fiction. But I always read poetry and always loved and always just admired the compression of it.
The compression.
The way that language and rhythm and imagery is so boiled down. It's like making maple syrup out of what looks like clear liquid. It just gets deeper and richer as you do what Pamela just did. Going through all these different drafts of a poem. And, obviously, if you do the same thing 366 times, there's going to be some repetition. You see the sunset a lot.
But that's where your inventiveness and your powers of perception, it was not. It was, we see how everything evolved, not even evolved, just you saw different aspects of what you were doing. And I was wondering if you could read from your early years, too, which I think your exposure to nature, if you can say, when you went to Alaska, has informed this book to a little degree?
Yes, I think so. So would you like me to read the Alaska passage?
Yes.
Rather than the
day 40 is great.
Okay. Well, that's got a little bit about Alaska.
Great.
Okay. This is also from the fall. So, October day 40, October 24th, 1:30 p.m. Sky wintry and gray. I walk down to the water, but nothing is grabbing my eye. So I sit on a rock, waiting for something to happen. And that is what happens. I sit. I see trees. Lots of trees. I hear distant cars passing on Route 28A and the half-hearted drill of a woodpecker. I think about the wilderness beaches I sat on in southeast Alaska with acres of popweed and long whips of kelp. I smoked drum tobacco back then, rarely, but I carried a pouch that was given to me by a guy I'd fallen in love with when we were tree planting in Sleet, and drawing warm smoke deep into our lungs felt delicious. When my back gets stiff and my butt gets cold, I head back through the woods, tracing a tumble-down stone wall that reminds me there used to be farms and quarries here before the drowned towns. These woods are a ghost town, and that's when I see it. Next to the wall is a massive oak tree that splits into not 2 but 4 separate trunks. 4 tall, thick-barked golden oaks joined at the base. How did that happen? I see a flat stone in the saddle, at least a foot wide, and I can't tell how long because living wood has grown up right around it, obscuring its base like the sword in the stone. It must have been decades ago, the stone doesn't wobble. It's surrounded by wood. By the flesh of the oak tree, it's cleft into 4 mighty trunks. The history's there for the taking, forest forensics. Decades ago, that flat stone crushed the apical bud so that 4 side shoots prospered. Then I realized that the stone must once have been part of the boundary wall, that some long-dead squirrel stashed an acorn beneath it that took root and grew, toppling the stone off the wall, where a sturdy colonial farm wife had placed it as her husband plowed. Could have been 200 years ago, many millennia after a glacier had lifted that stone from the bed of a dried inland sea. Perspective. It should be a druid throne.
That's Nina Shengold reading from Reservoir Year, Day 40. You have the ancient past, the distant past, the drowned towns, Alaska, and the year that you're walking, all in one piece. It's really quite something.
There's a concept, a tribal concept, and I don't know what tribe, which embarrasses me, but it's called vertical history. The idea that one space contains kind of the essence and ghosts of every culture and animal and so on that's passed through that spot, and that if you're still enough, you can tap into the layers of history that are in that place where you're standing.
Well, you certainly did that vertical history in this piece.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it's a haunted place. There is the sense, I've used the phrase drowned towns a little bit in this conversation. I'm not sure that everybody who walks or drives past the Catskill reservoirs realize when they see these beautiful large bodies of water that they don't belong there. That at one point this was the Esopus Creek meandering through a valley that was full of towns. There were 12 different towns around the valley that was flooded to make the Ashokan, which was the first of the Catskill reservoirs, and everybody there was given an eviction notice by the city of New York. It was that your home's going to be underwater in a few years. Here's a little money. Go move your family to higher ground. And if you'd like to be paid a little extra, we'll pay you to cut down your trees, exhume your dead. It was the biggest landworks project in the world at the time. The Panama Canal scooped it, not long after. But it was all done by hand. There's a wonderful book called "The Last of the Handmade Dams" by Bob Studing, which tells this whole history. But there's this feeling of loss and former lives that makes the beauty of it a kind of a haunted place for me.
And the book is haunted with it. You do mention it, and it's so invisible that it needs talking about or writing about.
Well, I'm hardly the only person to talk or write about it. There's or paint about it or make music about it or so on. I think a lot of people who've made their homes in the Hudson Valley or grown up in the Hudson Valley are aware of this history. It's not that long ago. It was the beginning of the 19th century. There are people alive now who can remember their aunt, Kate McLaughlin, who painted the cover for Reservoir Year, is a 12th generation resident of the Esopus Valley, and her own people were among those who were forced to leave their home. And she's done a lot of artwork about that addresses that, and some poems. She's also a poet. So.
Kate McLaughlin, and you have 3 illustrators and painters that you worked with on this book.
I do, and God bless Syracuse University Press for that. I sent them the work of 3 local artists whose work I just adored and hoped that maybe one of them would get to do the cover. And my editor loved all of them and said, "Can we use them all?" And, it was like a dream come true. So I have Kate's beautiful painting on the cover,
Beautiful.
And the 6 sections that you mentioned earlier are separated by hand-colored linocuts by Saugerties artist Carol Zaloom. So there's one of those at the beginning of each of the sections. And there's a black and white line drawing map of the reservoir and its environs by Will Lytle, who's a young comics artist and illustrator, and who also grew up near the reservoir. And Will said when I commissioned him to do the map, all those little icons I put around, all the little birds and buildings and botanicals and so on, are on separate files. If they want, they could kind of pull them out and use them to break up the type on the page, just like little printer's dingbats.
That was Will's suggestion?
That was Will's suggestion. And I think it was because he had seen Leslie Sharp's book, The Quarry Fox, which has these lovely black and white illustrations in it. And he said, they could do something like that. And I mentioned it to my editor, and she said, sure. I mean, they just kept saying yes. I could not have been happier. Never had a publication experience like this. Well,
and it was a very good decision because they enrich the book. They're so echo everything you're writing about, and from the woodcuts as the chapter headings. And I love Will Lytle's maps, and in Day 40 that you read about the tree with the 4 trunks and the stone. That's a beautiful illustration that he does for listeners who would be interested in this book. The art and the words go beautifully together.
And it just sort of pole vaulted into another creative sphere because the Syracuse University Press partnered with a group called Soundbeat, which is based at the university, and with Silver Hollow Audio, which is a local company in Phoenicia, to make an audio book. And for that, the actress Kathleen McNenny does a lovely job of narrating. She stumbles a lot less and pops her peas a lot less than I do. And there's music throughout it, just very subtle use of very beautiful acoustic music by Steve Kester, a local musician who's with a band called Two Dark Birds, which is also based in the Catskill Mountains. So it just feels like all of the other arts kind of gathered around this project somehow. I did not imagine that when I just started going out for walks every day and racing back to my car and scrawling down what I could remember to type up later that night.
You never know.
Yeah,
that's great. You one of the sections in the spring section. You do, and everything you do is so visual. And in poetry, there's list poems, where the poem lists a number of items and then sort of comments them or not comment on them. And I please read what I consider a list poem.
Okay.
Day 191.
Okay. So day 191, March 23rd, 1 p.m. Fishwife gulls trash talk on the Broadhead Point beach. Also actual trash, washed downstream by winter meltwater. I fill both arms with flotsam, a messy embrace. The things I carried: 4 water bottles, 1-gallon jug, 1 rotting flip-flop, kid's Nike sneaker full of wet leaves, Glad Tupperware lid, plastic Oreo cup, Dr. Pepper can, staring doll, matted blonde hair, plastic straw, beef jerky wrapper, cranberry life water bottle, pink sippy cup, Builder Bar wrapper, Chinese takeout box, turquoise barrette, Bud Light bottle, long twist of fishing line snagged on a stick. All this near the one fishing path I've seen that actually has a trash barrel. I throw it all in, doll staring skyward. On the path back, some broken twigs topped with bright red maple flowers. Up close, they look otherworldly, like tiny space lobsters.
Tiny space lobsters.
Take a look sometime.
That is so good.
They're so odd.
But after all the oddities of the trash that you listed, and coming back to nature, this is wonderful.
Oh, thanks.
We can go on and just read the whole book on the air, but that can't happen. But you also talk about life in the August 15th, day 336 section, and I was wondering if you could read that because it's very philosophical.
Okay. This is. I'm just going to read the. It's a longer piece. They range in length from one word or a couple of lines to a couple of pages. This is one of the longer ones. So I'm just going to read the last part of it. I went to the dentist today, had my teeth cleaned, did errands, sat in my desk chair, and typed a lot. Where is my reckless in love? How did I dwindle into this 60-year-old solo woman whose life is so dinky? It happens to many of us as our lives arc toward twilight, toward autumn. But sometimes that sense of loss cuts to the bone. What is added as time hurtles by, taking so much away? Patience, I think. I could never have gone to the same place every day for a year when I was young and eager. It's taken this long to learn that a life is a series of moments, no more and no less. The forest is the trees. The moon glows through clouds. There's a pale ring around it, like an areola. I walked past the rail where I stood with the sunset man months ago now, and wonder again why he came on so strong and then slipped away into nautical twilight. Did some look in my eye scare him off? Did he have someone waiting at home? Some men like to flirt, and that doesn't mean anything. That's what they tell themselves. Call it a reservoir mystery. This is why I write fiction, because you get to make up the plot. It was a bit of a spoiler alert in there. I didn't realize it when you mentioned that one, Sharon.
The Sunset Man makes several appearances, but then you leave it open-ended, which I like very much.
Right.
But the life is a series of moments. We don't have time. I'd love to read the Rilke poem that echoes this in an odd way, and it sounds like a love poem, but it's really a poem. It's a paean to each moment called You Only Exist. But Nina, I want you to let us know what's up for you coming up. You have a good month coming up in November.
Well, I do have an event coming up at the Greenkill Gallery in Kingston, and this is exciting for me because the book came out in July, in kind of very locked down time. So all the author events I've done have been on Zoom, and this one also is going to be filmed. It'll be filmed for YouTube as a live stream. But I'm reading with 3 other writers, and we will actually be in the gallery.
Wow.
We'll be at social distance, at microphones, talking to each other in a real place, not in my bedroom with a bunch of stuff on the wall, So I'm very excited about that. That is on Sunday. It's this Sunday, actually, the 15th. And it is at 8 o'clock at night. The other writers are Susan Crowitz, Marlene Edelstein, and Betty McDonald. And we're going to be talking about, we'll each read some of our work, but we're also going to be talking a lot about the ways that writers support each other, and about community and writers group and workshopping.
Will this be available for our listeners to hear?
Yes, it is. And I wish I had the link right in front of me, but if you look up Greenkill Gallery in Kingston, New York, that should bring you to the page. It's also on their Facebook page, and there's a link. It's an Eventbrite thing. There's a donation of $1 or what you will required to register for it as a live event, and it'll be Sunday the 15th at 8 p.m.
Great, and good luck with your audiobook.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's already out. It had its launch a week or two ago, and it's on all the usual suspect audiobook platforms.
Excellent. Nina, thank you so much for being on the show.